welcome back to Kdog's Movies. This time I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about, this particular portion. I'm not going to do this every single time, but I'll just probably do it one at a time, just because of the sheer quantity that you could talk about and that's out there. Now, I've already talked about this movie previously on my channel. It was mostly during the pandemic, and but it's a film that came out in the 1970s based on a book. Now, the reason why I want to talk about it again is because I just finished reading the book for the first time. And I saw the movie way before that and enjoyed the movie. We're going to be talking about Coma. Yes, this is the famous book written by Robin Cook, published back in 1977. And here is the 1978 theatrical motion picture starring Javier Bujold and Michael Douglas. Now, I may or may not be getting into the some spoiler alerts, because this particular story, and this is a case where the book is one thing, the movie is a different thing. Okay. So, a little bit of background on the film Coma. Coma, the film, came out in 1978, released by MGM, and it stars Michael Douglas and Javier Bujold. And it was a PG for the time, medical, not really, it did involve medicine, but it's a science fiction thriller. Is what the category is, and it was directed by a fellow author, Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton, and this is where there's similarities between Michael Crichton and Robin Cook. Both men are authors, and their background is in the medical field. Robin Cook is a actual doctor. I believe he works in, let's see here. Let's see if it says anything about him. Well, he has since retired from being a doctor. He spends his time between Boston and Florida, is what the book on the back says, because I think he's pretty much retired. But at the time he was, I think, he worked with Eyes and Ears, I think. I'm sure there's still an old book out there that has his credentials, but he is a legitimate doctor, as well as Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton, his background was to be a doctor, and, well, life had other plans. Actually, to quote another story of his, Jurassic Park, life found a way for Michael Crichton to get into books and films. And, of course, Michael Crichton was a huge science fiction fan, and he loved science fiction and reading it, so he thought that he would dabble into it and mix the science fiction with the medicine. And, of course, that led to his book and later film adaptation, The Andromeda Strain, which was a huge hit as a book and also as a film, which was directed by Robert Wise. Now, fast forward a little bit. By this time, Michael Crichton had directed his first motion picture, which was Westworld, which was based on an original story. And of course, that Westworld, if you watch the original 1973 Westworld, that film kind of predates what Jurassic Park would be. Uh, he kind of had this idea that possibly maybe the dark side of Walt Disney, and so. So in 1977, there's this book that is published called Coma, written by Dr. Robin Cook. And, of course, Michael Crichton is wanting to continue in films, so he develops to the screen. Matter of fact, wrote the screenplay to the 1978 hit film. Unfortunately, I don't think the film, it was a big hit at the time, but has kind of become almost a forgotten movie. But that being said, let's get into this, because I've already talked about the film, what I think of the film, and it's a very good film, and it's a good thriller. Good thing I didn't watch this a year ago when I myself was in the hospital for a ruptured appendix. So, and if this is why I say I'm going to get into spoilers. One of the things that the main character goes through is appendicitis, but it's not really. She doesn't really have appendicitis. A certain surgeon causes her to have sharp belly pain and pass out when he drugs her. Now let's get into this, because this is definitely where, again, the book is one thing, the movie is another thing. Because it's one thing, first of all, it is literally impossible to take a book and straight up adapt it into a film. You can't do it. There's just no way. But when it comes to, in the case of Coma, it's almost like it's two different stories with similar things that happen. The book opens up with a character, and this is just in the prologue, a character by the name of Nancy Greenlee. Now we're talking about the book. The character of Nancy Greenlee is a young 23-year-old single female. She is wanting, she's just a typical young woman who's single. She's wanting to live life. She's studying to develop a career, and of course she is wanting to date guys, okay? But she has developed a little bit of female trouble, a little bit of bleeding in the female anatomy, and it's a procedure that needs to be taken care of surgically. And so she goes in to have the procedure, and by the end of the procedure, she ends up comatose, in a coma state. So when the book actually starts, the prologue, then you go into the first official chapter. Then we meet Susan Wheeler, who is another 23-year-old. She's another 23-year-old woman, single, but she is studying to become a resident at Boston Memorial Hospital. And so she has to, she's basically an intern, according to the book. She's an intern and but but Susan is very strong-willed. She's very independent, and comes to the hospital. She's not looking to meet anybody or develop relationships or anything like that. But she wants to she wants to further her career. She's wanting to be good at it and be the best that she can be. And so she meets up with a resident and starts studying under him, an official resident by the name of Dr. Mark Bellows. Bellows he's a 28 years old, single guy, and so he takes on these young students to begin training them how to become, earn their way to becoming a resident themselves. And they stumble upon Nancy. Susan, but that triggers Susan's thinking, because here is a woman who's the same exact age as her. She had her whole life ahead of her. Then all of a sudden she goes into a coma, brain dead. And so she can't stop asking questions. And so on. And this leads down to, I want to find out what happened to this woman. What happened to her? Why did she go into a coma? And so she starts looking at files, of the surgical files. And then there's another patient that comes in who has his name, he's a young man, healthy man. He's like the epitome of health. And his name is Sean Berman, I believe. And he is in his early 30s, but he has had an injury because he's had an injury and he's there to have it fixed. His leg. Same thing, but he's the epitome of health. But same thing happens to him. That goes on an investigation to where Susan begins to question the authority, question, what's going on, and investigate. And she finds out that it's all taking place, it's all taking place at the hospital, and there are other things at play here. There's something not on the up and up. And, of course, finding out that it's an OR8, that there's a valve, an extra valve attached to one of the oxygen hoses, and plus she begins a relationship with Bellows. And so she kind of gets him involved, and there's a colleague of his that lives in an apartment building, and supposedly this colleague had implanted some drugs into a locker that was once assigned to Bellows. And so they question Bellows whether he had anything to do with this, and so on and so forth. So he goes to the colleague's apartment and finds him dead. And almost gets killed himself. And then it goes back and forth to Susan again, they're developing this relationship. So she stays at Bellows' house, and he tells her what happened. But then the next night, she goes to her apartment. Whoever attacked Bellows is there and does attack her, and there's a it's kind of a, they give a little bit more identity to that guy, and it's like a mob hitman. And then he gets killed in the freezer. He gets killed in the freezer by Susan at the hospital where they were dissecting former patients, and these are the people that have donated their bodies for research and stuff like that. So, and then finally it ends up at the Jefferson Institute where all these people are in comatose state, and then she finds out that there's a Dr. Stark. And she's been in communication, like she's been informing Bellows and she's been informing Dr. Stark of what's going on. I'm finding this. And when she goes to the Jefferson Institute, almost gets killed again trying to escape. The first person she calls is the Dr. Stark. Then in the book, it is revealed to be that Dr. Stark is the one who is plotting all these certain people to be killed, and then sold their parts sold off to the Jefferson Institute. Their body parts are put on the black market, so on and so forth. Even though these are fairly healthy people. Now, that brings us to the 1978 film. The big differences in this film is, first of all, they advanced the ages of Susan Wheeler, and I think they kept Dr. Bellows, Michael Douglas, the same age, maybe 28 to 30 years old, but they advanced Susan Wheeler's age. As a matter of fact, in the film, she's already a resident. She's a female doctor practicing on patients, but this was definitely a thing of the 1970s where you have the men have one thing, the men were getting all the credit and all the big shot jobs, and the women were kind of getting the jobs that no one wants to do, and that's a little bit in the book where there's a little bit of what we now call toxic masculinity, but yeah, they advance Susan Wheeler's age to be, I'm gonna say, about mid to late 20s. Her and Bellows are already dating. Their boyfriend girlfriend in the film. Also, they don't really, I don't think they give I'm trying to think. I don't think they give the Sean Berman character, I think they changed his name in the film, but he's played by a young Tom Selleck in this movie. And also they changed Nancy Greenlee's procedure. Nancy Greenlee is the first victim. But they establish in the film that she was friends with Susan Wheeler. But they also add that she's had an affair with a doctor and has gotten pregnant. And so she's going in for a abortion. And during the procedure, that's when she is comatose. But also, there's things that they added. They added a whole thing about possibly it's the anesthesiologist that committed the crime. They changed the name of, in the book it's Dr. Stark, in the film it's Dr. Harris. And they also, in the film, add this subplot again with the anesthesiologist being Dr. George. Dr. George. Dr. George, well, they said, well, Dr. George did it. And then at the end of the film, you see it's Dr. George Harris. But in the book, it's Dr. Stark. And so they change, there's several name changes. They leave Bellows out of the possibly getting attacked. Matter of fact, in the film, Michael Douglas kind of portrays him as somebody who possibly could be in on it. Possibly, like he's possibly in on it. But then it later revealed, he finally, when he comes, in the film, he has to come to her rescue and reveal that, and call the authorities that the Dr. Harris and Dr. Stark, they're the same character, they are committing murder to patients. It's one thing if a patient dies during a procedure by pure accident, but it's another thing when it's intended. And so in both versions of the story, you have Susan Wheeler, Dr. Bellows, and there is a bit of a relationship, and patients are going into comatose without, they're being murdered, and then their organs are being sold off to the black market. That's the same thing, and the outcome, the climax of the book is a little bit different than the climax in the movie. Because the climax of the movie, they give you a little bit of hope that everything's going to be okay, because the Dr. Harris is assumed to be arrested, because once Susan is wheeled out of the OR, Bellows is there, and he just closes the door, but you see two police officers outside. And as they're wheeling Susan down the hall, the doctor goes and turns off the X-ray lamp, and you hear the police off-screen say, "We're waiting for you, Dr. Harris." And then it cuts to the lights going out in the OR. But in the book, it's Susan waking up post-surgery, possibly, and Bellows standing outside, and all the Dr. Stark could see are two figures. And when the door swings, he sees police officers. So that's where it is the same, but you don't know. But the film shows, like, Mark, don't let them do the surgery, don't let them do the surgery. But in the book, it's kind of left up in the air. Is Susan going to be okay? Is everything going to be okay? And even but the film also kind of ends on a note that says, okay, she survived it, but then the doctor, Susie takes his hat off, the lights go out, and then it cuts to black. End of story. So, and you could tell that, I don't know if it was studio interference or if it was Crichton say, hey, we need to change these things up and kind of tighten it up a little bit, because even the things that the characters there's character name changes. There are the reason why they're going in for surgery is completely different. But still, the book. However, the book, if this is also a case where if you were to faithfully adapt the book into a film, it would be rated R. It's there's some activity that characters do. There's words that the characters say. And of course, that's nowhere to be found in this film. There's some light profanity in the film, even though it's rated PG. However, it does have a little bit of nudity in it. But again, this was 1978, and how they got by with it said, well, they're not performing sex. And plus, you're showing patients, medical patients who are in a comatose state. They're suspended on wires. And so the book, even the book, has a illustration of a nude man on the cover of it. So it's... And so this, even on the cover of the DVD here, you kind of see how they did it in the film. But yeah. So I even have the audiobook version, so it helped me to read it. January Lavoie was the actress who was portraying all the characters in the audiobook. Now, like I said, it's a good thing I didn't read this or watch the film while I was out for surgery last year, because I would have lost my, because the end of the film is the end of the story is the doctor is wanting, diagnosing Susan with appendicitis, and so he's taking out a healthy appendix, but he just gave her something in her drink while he's revealing his evil plan. So just in both the book and the film, he reveals his evil plan, and so he slips her a little drug in the drink to cause her to have sharp belly pain and make it feel like an appendix, but it's her appendix is fine. But I think I would have gone over the edge, like, please don't let it be, because I was watching Turner Classic Movies. Well, this is MGM, released by Warner Brothers, so it's part of the Turner Entertainment Company, and TCM could have easily played this, and thankfully they didn't. They played some other movies I was watching to keep me comfortable. But yeah, that is Coma. The book came out in 1977. The film came out in 1978, exactly 1 year later. And it's this was a typical thing at that time. It still is today. There's tons of books that get adapted into films, but back in the 70s, it was a big ticket thing, because if you had a hot selling book, you were going to have a big selling movie. Think about it. Jaws. That was one of the influences why Dr. Robin Cook wanted to get into novels, because he loved what Peter Benchley did with Jaws, and he saw himself, hey, blockbuster book ends up being a big blockbuster film. Maybe I can do that. So, and of course, Coma was Robin Cook's
second book, and Coma, the film, was, I believe, Michael Crichton's second directorial film. I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure. It definitely would be like he had the Andromeda Strain, Westworld, and this. And so, yeah. So, I think we're just going to move on to the next film and talk about that. So, yeah, I'll pop up occasionally to do, like a book, try to do a book to film adaptation review. So, but I've already, the thing was, this was kind of easy because I've already talked about Coma as a film, just kind of recapped, but I needed to talk about the book and how the book is completely different than the film. So, on to the next feature. Well, we're continuing on with the movies that I have on this particular strand of video. Now, this is now Memorial Day weekend. Been busy with other things, so if it jumps from Easter to Memorial Day, that's because I hadn't had time to really sit down and watch movies. But this being a 3-day weekend, we're going to take a look at some films. We're going to take a look at some military-themed films. And so I thought, let's watch some of these war-based, military-themed films, because the reason why we celebrate Memorial Day is for those who literally paid the ultimate price for our freedom. I mean, I'm trying to find the right words to describe it. It's the ones who laid down their lives so that we can be free, go to the movies, go to worship, say the things that we wish to say. And so there's not enough thank you in the world that we could give are the ones who have given it all so that we can be free. So in this particular film, I decided to show, this would be more for Veterans Day, but the film tackles things. This film tackles some subjects about what our guys went through in Vietnam. Well, this is not necessarily anybody that is fallen, but the horrors of war is depicted in this film. That's the reason why I'm going to show it and talk about it. Well, what am I talking about? It is from 1987. It was a comedy classic. Also, it has some very serious moments. It is from Touchstone Pictures, 1987. Good Morning Vietnam, starring Robin Williams. So, this is a classic movie from the 80s. A classic military movie, classic Robin Williams movie. I'll get into that afterwards because even though this film was successful, there's some Robin Williams things that happen in this film because I know I've done a little bit of research and done a little bit of about, because this film is based on a true story. It's based on about a real life disc jockey by the name of Adrian Cronauer, and he was a disc jockey for the Armed Forces Radio, and he coined the phrase "Good Morning Vietnam," but he had a trademark way of saying "Good Morning Vietnam." So let's take a look at the film, and I'll come back with some of the trivia and what I think of the film. So here we go. From 1987, from Disney's Touchstone Pictures label, Robin Williams, Good Morning Vietnam. Okay, so that was Good Morning Vietnam from 1987. with Robin Williams as the star of the film. Now, this film, what took place, is loosely based on a true story, and it's matter of fact, the real Adrian Cronauer, he did give his blessing to the film, but however, he stated a lot of facts that are not present in the film, and there are things that are in the film that never happened. So that's why I mean that this became a Robin Williams vehicle. You know, what he would be later criticized with movies like Patch Adams and Mrs. Doubtfire and things like that nature. It kind of started here with Good Morning Vietnam. And as much as I'm trying to think here, so let me Google here. I know that this film was a hit. It was quite a box office hit, and it was really playing to the comedy of Robin Williams. Yeah, $123.9 million is what it garnered. According to Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a 90% fresh. He was nominated for Academy Award for Best Actor. Yeah, it was one of the most successful films of the year 1987. It was the number 4 on the top 10 list of the highest grossing films of that year. But the real Adrian Cronauer has stated in interviews and so forth that only maybe 30% of the film is actually true, because he said, well, let's look at the facts of what actually was true. Adrian Cronauer actually was a radio disc jockey for the Armed Forces Radio. Okay? And he did have his famous trademark, which was the phrase, "Good Morning Vietnam." However, the way Robin Williams does it in the film and the way that the real Adrian Cronauer did it are completely different. Robin Williams has this great big crescendo. When he says he does this great big crescendo, like, "Good Morning Vietnam!" So that's the way that Robin Williams does it in the film. But in all truthfulness, Adrian Cronauer, the real Adrian Cronauer, said that that's not how you do it. So you got to keep in mind that this is really early in the morning. You have just strolled out of bed. And immediately you've got to go on the air. You do not have any of the news stories picked. You do not have your choice of records to play. You don't even have your contact lenses on or your glasses on. So, it was more along the lines, and this is my impersonation of Adrian Cronauer actually doing his phrase. Now, again, he has not chosen the records. He has not put in his contact lenses. He's not even started his day yet. So, good morning, Vietnam. That's how he actually did it.
maybe a little bit longer than what I did holding up the good. That's one difference. Also, the real Adrian Cronauer stated that if he had said half of the things that Robin Williams says on air, he would have been pulled off the air in a heartbeat. Yes, a lot of that comedy that he says would not have been appropriate. He said, I was just a normal disc jockey. Now, another thing that he was not reprimanded for saying false news, which would have been one of the things that he would have been reprimanded for in real life. But there was no interaction with a VC. As far as I know, none of that stuff. But also, one of the things that he's reprimanded for in the film is for playing modern music, playing rock and roll. And that's something that the filmmakers and probably Disney had shoehorned into the story that, okay, this was the mid-60s and rock and roll was still very much a taboo. Not so much. The real Adrian Cronauer, he said, we were the Armed Forces Radio. We played rock and roll. We played polka. We played even country and western. And he said, I like all those genres. And he said, we played all kinds of records. So to be reprimanded for playing a rock and roll record was not true. The other thing was, that is true, Adrian Cronauer actually was a teacher. He taught American English to the Vietnamese who wanted to learn American English. He did do that. However, he did not teach them how to use profanity. That profanity and or street slang. Yeah, none of that happened in the film, but he did teach American English to Vietnamese, nor did he do it to get the attention and the affection of a pretty girl. Neither. Yeah, none of that. However, as a film, it is a very entertaining film. It is funny, some of the things that he says, but again, if anybody had said, even if you said some of that stuff today, you would be reprimanded. Even if you're working for the Armed Forces Radio, you still obey the guidelines of, because technically that is the United States government, and you still have to abide by the broadcast rules of the Federal Communications Commission, which is a part of the United States government, which means that there are certain words of profanity that you cannot use. Now, this day and age, when we watch a television show, particularly on cable, they will use profanity. Well, that's a little bit different. Cable has its own different set of rules. That is, they have self-policing rules, more self-policing rules, rather than actual federal communications rules. Because with cable, it's to make sure that no one is getting it for free. Yeah. But some of the things that Robin Williams says in the film would be it would be grounds to be at least kicked off the air. But see, here's another thing. The real Adrian Cronauer actually got along with the person who was in charge of the Armed Forces Radio. He got along with all the officials. And here they in this film, this is where the Robin Williams isms was that there had to be an authority figure that he had to fight and battle. So in this case, you have a character by the name of Sergeant Major Dickerson, played by T.J. Walsh, and you have a what was he, a programming director? I think he would be a programming director. I'm not quite sure, but but his character's name was Lieutenant Stephen Hawk. Now that's in the film. Those names those are fake names. They do that constantly for dignity to the person, but Lieutenant Stephen Hawk was played by Bruno Kirby. Excuse me, and they are constantly at odds with Robin Williams's Cronauer, and so it's kind of the he has to battle some form of authority figure, and that the person in charge doesn't like him, and they want him court-martialed and whatever else that they can pin him down with. But I would say do check this film out. It is one of the more popular films about the military, and it has its strong dramatic elements, but it's still considered to be a comedy because it's Robin Williams, so you know what you're going to get. You're going to get the off the wall, and that was another thing. Like most of the when Robin is on, when he depicts Cronauer as a disc jockey, all the stuff he says is very improvised. So some of the jokes about the Pope and using Walter Cronkite and Gomer Pyle, and so all the impersonations come out much less like the genie. And this was also one of the roles that helped land him the role as the genie in Aladdin. So thus being produced by Disney, they say, hey, remember Good Morning Vietnam? Like 90% of the DJ stuff was improvised. But then again, if you were actually on the air, you could not say a good number of that stuff. So I think we're just going to move on to the next film. But yeah, Good Morning Vietnam. Do check it out. It is one of the more fun military films, but also does have some serious stuff in there, dealing with just life, death of the troops, and how important morale is to the troops as well. That's one thing that sticks out as well. But let's move on to the next movie. Well, happy Memorial Day. Here it is the next day, and we're doing military movies just because of an honor of Memorial Day, the rest of this video. So we're going to take a look at least one more. So we're going to take a look at a film that came out in the early 1960s. I forget, when did this come out? 1962. Thank you. I have the Blu-ray in handy. In 1962, film
Film producer Daryl F. Zanuck set on a quest to do something that was very ambitious at the time. Daryl F. Zanuck was the head of production at 20th Century Fox, and of course at the time he was kind of forced out of the studio system. So he set on a mission to tell a story that is literally, he set on a mission to tell the story of the D-Day invasion, which was June 6th, 1944. So, and of course we will in a few days celebrate the anniversary of that. But so the film, what am I talking about? It is The Longest Day. Yeah, from 1962, Daryl F. Zanuck's The Longest Day. Quite a huge film. It's a long film. So do sit down, relax. You notice I'm standing up for this time because, you know, this is Memorial Day, and of course I do salute those who have served, and as well those who are currently serving, have served, and those who have given it all. And of course this film definitely goes into the whole D-Day invasion. Now, check the film out, and when I come back I'll have some little bit of trivia information about the film and how it had its own battle that it had to deal with. Of course, every film has a battle that almost comes this close to shutting down the studio. Well, so here we go. Here is from 1962, released by 20th Century Fox. Gosh, I can't tell you who's all in this because there is like 42, 43 stars, both nationally and internationally, in this film. So yeah, there's just too many to name, as well as directors, and I'll come back and explain that. So, from 1962, 20th Century Fox release, here is Daryl F. Zanuck's The Longest Day. Okay, so that was The Longest Day, produced by Daryl F. Zanuck. And of course this was an independent production, that's why it's called Daryl F. Zanuck's The Longest Day. Now 20th Century Fox financed the film, and but Daryl F. Zanuck was by this time just wanting to become a film producer, because he had left the studio and went to Paris because he was tired. He was burned out of Hollywood. He was tired of working for the studio, and so he went on to produce several films, but unfortunately the majority of those films were not exactly successful, but until he stumbled upon The Longest Day, which was a novel written by Cornelius Ryan, and this is a huge. This was definitely a huge film to undertake, because there is, how many does it say here on the box? It's like 42 stars that were, and like 42 national and international stars that were in this film, and which include John Wayne, Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, Red Buttons, Eddie Albert, Robert Wagner, Roddy McDowell. I'm just trying to think of who's all in. Oh yeah, Richard Burton is in this film. God,
gosh, even some unknown like teen idols, like there was a singer by the name of Fabian. He was in this film. I forget who else, but also a young Sean Connery, pre James Bond. Sean Connery in this film, but actually, I think he had just signed on to be Bond while making this film. And also, this film had an interesting situation in which it was directed by 4 directors. There was 2 American directors directing 2 different segments. There was one director that handled the D-Day invasion on the American side, and there was an American director who handled like all the paratroopers coming in. A director by the name of Ken Anakin, he handled all the British troops from his side, and then there was another director that handled the German from the German side. So about 4 directors were at the helm of this, but this is an example why the director is not always in charge. It's the producer who is really in charge. You know, because take for example a TV show. A TV show, let's say an episode like Big Bang Theory. There's a director to each episode, and that director may not direct the next episode. It will be another director that comes in and directs those episodes, directs 20 episodes a season. Because when you think of the Big Bang Theory, you don't think of whoever directed the episode. You think Chuck Lorre. Chuck Lorre is the producer. The producer is the one who's in charge. John Landis, the director John Landis, said when it comes to TV shows or movies of this nature, directors are more like traffic cops. But when it comes to movies, if your name is above the title or says a so-and-so's film, you are the one that gets credit for that. So in this case, Darryl F. Zanuck took credit for The Longest Day. Now, The Longest Day also was a huge production, like I've said before. As many stars as there was, and as many directors that it had, it was shot pretty close to the actual events that took place, just maybe a decade or so, a little more than a decade when they actually happened. So they actually filmed at Normandy. They actually filmed at Omaha, at the beaches in Normandy, and the little French villages and so on and so forth. They tried to film this pretty close to those areas where that actually happened. And so they were originally given a $8 million budget. And of course, at the time, every film pretty much has that whole, it almost bankrupted the studio. But in this case, yes, it did. I've shared the story about Heaven's Gate and how that film literally did shut down a film company, United Artists. But this was a case where everything was able to be turned around and be salvaged here. And because Cleopatra was being filmed simultaneously, which was 100% a 20th Century Fox production. And Cleopatra had ballooned up to way beyond what the studio was wanting to spend on it, and it was over $24 million.
and it literally almost did shut down that studio, to the point where the studio was looking to sell property just for quick cash, which includes Century City in in Hollywood. If you ever familiar with Century City, well, that was actually property of 20th Century Fox, because it was going to be used as a huge backlot. It had western towns, and it had Grand Central Station in it, and so they had to sell it as real estate, and so it's a huge shopping center, and movie theaters and so on and so forth are there now. But anyway, that's what they had to get, as well as The Longest Day. They were going to sell that film just for quick cash, and Daryl Zanuck said, "No, you're not." Said, "Trust me on this, I've got something here." And so when the film came out, it garnered huge critical praise, made several hundred million, I don't know how much, like millions of dollars at the box office, was a huge box office hit. It literally helped save the studio, but it did have its own battles, per se, in order to depict a very faithful depiction of June 6, 1944, at the D-Day invasion. So it's quite a lengthy film per se, but it's a good film. It just amazes. This is a prime example. You are never going to get anything like this ever again. I mean, you won't have that many stars. I mean, what's the closest anything's been to like this? A Marvel movie? Maybe? But this was telling, an actual story, an actual war that happened. And the only other time I can think, I'm sure there's other films, but there's also the only other faithful depiction of the beaches of Normandy would be in 1998's Saving Private Ryan. It wouldn't be until that film you would see a film like this again. So and of course, to keep the budget low, I think that's the reason why they also shot it in black and white. However, it was shot in the CinemaScope process, which was a popular widescreen format at the time. We still kind of use it to this day, but it's just called scope. CinemaScope was a trademark widescreen format by 20th Century Fox. They did lease it out to other studios. It's like if you look around, you'll see like Warner Brothers films and Disney. Disney used it like a few times for even for Lady and the Tramp. It was shot in CinemaScope. The Robe was the first one, and then also there was Jailhouse Rock, which was by MGM. It was shot in CinemaScope. So 20th Century Fox lent that process out, but mostly it was a 20th Century Fox film format that they were using, and to dazzle audiences in widescreen. Now it's pretty much a standard when you go to a regular movie theater. You know, the scope process. They just call it scope now because the studios and photographers and the camera people, they like, let's just bury Fox's patents on this and just make this a generic thing to where we don't have to pay a licensing fee every time, because that's the thing that Fox was going to make buku money off of. But anyway, that's a different thing. But The Longest Day, probably one of the best war movies depicting the D-Day invasion. Do check it out. So yeah, it's just amazing that they were able to get this on screen. And yeah, so with that, I believe I'm going to close down this video, and we'll have another one up soon, whenever I get around to watching the movies, putting these things together. So from me to you, see you later.